Episode 1 of Dutton Ranch begins with us following Beth Dutton and Rip Wheeler as they explore the breathtaking scenery of the surrounding Yellowstone area. Riding out till sunset, they eventually sit under a tree drinking, reflecting back on the quiet and tranquil life they've managed to carve for themselves. The pair promise that they'll always find time to ride together, but as they drift off, crackles of lightning strobe across the sky. Unfortunately, this causes a fire to ignite in the distance, an angry orange inferno that's heading right for the ranch. While Rip gets to work cutting fences and getting the cattle out, he tasks Beth with grabbing Carter. The trio scramble, grabbing everything they can before heading out to safety. With the home lost and the land a smouldering mess of shattered dreams, they drive out to parts unknown. We then cut forward to Rio Paloma in Texas 6 months later. The place is blistering hot, a far cry from the ranch they grew up with. The pair have bought a new ranch here, initially belonging to the Edward family. Meanwhile, we get our first glance of the rival ranch we'll be following this season. Rob Will Jackson awakens a guy called Wes in the middle of the night, and they head out to the fields where he shoots the guy dead for looking at his tally books. Now, Rob Will is not going to tolerate having snitches on his payroll, and Chet, another guy here, is shocked to see this. However, it seems Rob Will is not the head honcho here. Along with Rob Will's brother, Joaquin, seemingly being the more business-minded of the two, there's also their mother Beulah Jackson. She's the matriarch around these parts and the one calling the shots. She's the one keeping everything in check. Interestingly, she bumps into Beth in the morning when she shows up at the slaughterhouse needing to schedule her steer in. Beulah stonewalls her and Beth is not best pleased. When the pair butt heads over logistics, she realises the game is rigged in their favour and leaves. And the Jackson family seem to hold all the keys to the locks and control the doors in Rio Paloma. And unless Beth wants to get into the extortion game, this may not end well. Meanwhile, an altercation at the gas station between Rip and Rob Will preludes drama that could spill over into something far worse. However, the Jacksons have much bigger fish to fry here, given the situation involving Wes's death. Now, Rip only has one other helper on his lot of land, with a faithful guy called Azul helping him. As for Carter, he struggles to fit in at school, but he does attract the attention of a young blonde. She encourages Carter to meet her at the rodeo that night, where she basically uses him to buy booze. Oldest trick in the book, of course, and he falls for it hook, line and sinker. Out in the parking lot though, Carter notices another blonde, Oriana, in an altercation with a guy. When he puts his hands on her, Carter snaps and beats the guy down, getting himself arrested in the process. Meanwhile, we meet a vet by the name of Everett McKinney, who shows up to euthanize an injured horse by the side of the road. Beth is also here too. She gets cold feet and urges him not to kill the animal, and despite the odds being against her, Beth makes the right call and decides to keep it alive. Although the horse is going to take a while to get back to 100%, it seems like the right call. It's been quite a day for the family, no doubt, and Carter is even let go too. Part of this stems from Oriana, who bails him out and seems to have big connections around town, especially with Sheriff Wade. And as the episode closes out, Joaquin encourages his mother to send Rob Will away for a while. He thinks the kid needs rehab and a fresh start, but unfortunately it's not quite that simple. While Rip is out patrolling the ranch, he finds Wes's body, half buried in the dirt. Episode 2 of Dutton Ranch begins with us cutting back to 8 days after the fire. Held out at the Western Inn, Rip manages to secure a place in Texas for them. Montana will always be their home, no doubt, but right now the attention is fixed on bigger and, hopefully, better things. Part of the issues in Texas stem from the Jackson family. This ranch that the Duttons have secured have been a lucrative piece of land that the Jackson family have been after for nearly 20 years now. However, the place has a lot of soul, and the owner, Jeannie, wants it handed over to a family that will properly care for it. Now, back in the present, Rip heads to an auction with Beth, but the Jackson family are also here too. Beth and Beulah eyeball one another the whole time, and you can already tell that these two are not going to see eye to eye. Thankfully, Everett McKinney may be just a ticket to help with Beth's slaughterhouse problem. Now, Everett reveals to Beth that he knows a place near San Antonio that could serve as their new slaughterhouse. It's quite a drive though, and the owner of said slaughterhouse is a man called Claudio. He runs a small operation with 4 guys, and it seems like he and Beth may get along well as they talk shop. Rip needs more help and he brings in a new guy to his crew, Zachariah Moss. The man is a former drunk, but he vows to stay clean and stay loyal to Rip's operation. Azul is the one who initially put in a good word for him, and it seems like it may work out for everybody. Meanwhile, Wes's wife, Whitney, shows up with her kid to the Jackson barn house, demanding answers about her husband. Joaquin obviously knows what's happening here, and he poker faces his way through an evasive chat with her. Whitney is not buying it though, and so she heads to the police station and reports Wes's disappearance. One person who can't poker face this is Chet, who's put in his place by Beulah during a particularly tense chat together. None of this is helped by the reveal that Wes's body is not on the Edwards Ranch anymore. So although Rob Will was essentially banished, Wes's missing body is still a point of contention they need to handle. Now Oriana spends more time with Carter in the midst of all this, but she very much plays the hot-cold game with him. When she receives messages from Grandma B, her demeanour changes and she heads back home, telling Carter she has a boyfriend. If it wasn't obvious already after those texts, we now learn that Oriana's grandmother is none other than Beulah, and the pair have a lot of hostility between them. With Rob Will, Oriana's father, off her rehab, Beulah wants to mould her in her image. Oriana though wants no part in this, but she's forced into the family business whether she wants to or not. And that night Beth introduces Rip to Everett. The pair get along well, talking briefly about the ranch and Beth's stubbornness. However, Rip has a secret. He's kept Wes's body on ice in the barn. In the middle of the night, he gets up and drives out to the old mine, dumping the body away from the ranch. Episode 3 of Dutton Ranch begins with Beth awakening to find Rip downstairs, dressed and making coffee. She questions why he wasn't in bed and Rip shrugs it off, claiming he has stuff on his mind. Now Beth is heading off to Dallas for a big meeting to find prospective buyers for their meat. Before she goes, the pair make sure to keep their promise of going for a ride together. This meeting is a big deal, and en route Beth drives down to see Claudio, picking up her meat. Things are tough for his business right now, but Beth promises to try and turn his fortunes around with their ranch. With the meat in a cooler, Beth then heads to a meeting with Giles Moore. His staff are run ragged and half of them aren't happy about the shortchanged tips from the previous night either. Beth senses an opportunity here and speaks to one of the disgruntled workers. Beth wants her to add one perfectly grilled ribeye to the family meal, promising to double the shortfall if she does. With the ribeye in hand, Beth makes a good impression to Moore and explains that she's about to set out and make deals with others if he doesn't play ball. This is still a pretty dicey situation though, let's be honest, and Beth is reminded that she's up against the Frontier Hospitality Group. Furthermore, a guy called Zane Nash is difficult. Beth shrugs all of this off, confident she can handle it. That night, Joaquin shows up at the bar and introduces himself as a problem solver. He's obviously part of the Jacksons' inner circle, and Beth isn't about to do business with them anytime soon. However, she is quite pleased that Beulah has mentioned her once or twice. Speaking of which, Beulah delivers a speech at Ellis Logan's funeral. All his fellow cops are there too, and she tells stories about the past and how integral he was to the community. Interestingly, Everett is also in attendance. Now in the graveyard, Everett catches up with Beulah. It seems like they have history, especially when she mentions how she misses him. He simply retorts, "Well, take care," and walks away. With Everett gone, Sheriff Wade speaks to Beulah about the rumblings currently going on regarding Wes's disappearance. He tells her to keep the bunkhouse under control. Meanwhile, Carter meets with Oriana, who continues to bemoan her situation with Hoyt. Carter decides to urinate all over his truck to impress Oriana, while she decides to smash up Hoyt's truck afterwards. Now Hoyt bursts out of his house promising to come after them as the pair drive off. However, they're stopped by the cops soon after on the road. Wade warns that Oriana is making way too much noise here and tells them that if they continue to stir up trouble, he's going to put them both in handcuffs. That night they sit together at Oriana's place, where she encourages Carter to smoke weed with her. They eventually start kissing afterwards. Now on the ranch, Rip is called out to the fields, where he finds a distressed cow suffering from foot and mouth disease. Everett confirms the diagnosis when he drives out and warns that it could spread through his ranks like wildfire if he's not careful. Rip mulls over whether this might be the new bull that he bought, and that's a huge problem, especially as Beth is in the middle of setting up meetings regarding their perfect livestock. Rip acts fast, tasking Azul and Zach to quarantine the herd and put a pasture in between them. They're going to camp out for a few days and keep an eye on all of this to make sure it doesn't get worse. While this is going on, Beulah receives a call from Mariano, reminding her that they need no surprises as business is about to pick up. These surprises, of course, come from Wes's disappearance and the continued rumblings with Whitney sniffing around asking questions. Beulah decides to head over and pay her a visit, only when she arrives at Whitney's, she finds the door is unlocked and Whitney herself has gone. Now up at the ranch, Anna Dupree shows up with a gun, pointing at Zachariah. Rip tries to mediate the situation, especially as Anna mentions that Zach killed her daughter, Teresa. Everett eventually takes Anna away, while Rip warns Zachariah that he better be repenting for what he's done. That night, around the campfire, Zach explains that he and Teresa were madly in love. They got into an argument and he was drunk, and he tried to run away, but he accidentally put his truck in reverse and ran her down. Azul claims it was an accident, but Zach has been eaten up by the guilt around this all this time. Maria Paloma have a long memory, and her death hit the community hard. As a result, Zach was looked at as the devil. And off the back of this, Everett says goodbye to Rip, pointing out Zach is a good man that's done terrible things. Beth then rings, pointing out she secured the deal, but of course they still have the situation involving the cattle to contend with. Rip urges her to head home as soon as she can. When Beth heads back, she and Rip both realise, with horror, that a foot and mouth disease has spread. Episode 4 of Dutton Ranch begins with devastation plaguing the ranch. The foot and mouth disease has been spreading, and Rip is more convinced than ever that it's the new bull they bought at the auction that's caused this. Now Beth doesn't want Carter to see the devastation, but he's too busy with Oriana to care very much. Beth heads home and finds the pair in bed together, and soon learns that she's a Jackson too. Beth drives to Gale home, and en route Beth makes her displeasure known. She also threatens to raise hell against Oriana if she messes with Carter. Of course, Beulah has already given Oriana more than enough warnings, and it's largely fallen on deaf ears for her. When Beth pulls up at the driveway, Beulah approaches and wants to bury the hatchet over a drink. Beth is having none of it, and even Beulah's thinly veiled threat about Rio Paloma being a small town isn't enough to dissuade her, as Beth eventually drives away. Beth has bigger fish to fry anyway, as she gets to work investigating this bull. She rings Dr. Paul, the man responsible for the pre-sale examination and blood work. Unfortunately, he's never heard of the sale, which only backs up Rip's suspicions of foul play. Now back inside, Oriana is kept on a tight leash by Beulah, while Carter heads out to try and find some work. He's guided toward a rancher called Danny Ray, who quickly brings him into his operation and teaches him methods in the self-proclaimed School of Life. A part of this includes drinking and practicing lassoing. However, he also has an African leopard called Xena in his possession. When Beth rings shortly after, she encourages Carter to take Oriana out for dinner with no curfew. All of this, of course, is a play to get rid of Carter while they work on the cattle. Meanwhile, Everett is called out to the Jackson Ranch when he receives word that they have a pregnant mare about to foal. Doc Sturgis is on vacation, and that leaves Everett as the only reliable guy to fall back on. When he shows up, he finds there's no pregnant mare, and it's just Beulah's way of bringing him over to share a drink. They talk about the past and the dreams of retiring away from it all, before the conversation is steered steeply back into tenuous waters. Although Chet is a decent enough cowboy, Everett knows he's completely out of his depth here. This line of inquiry inevitably leads him over to the situation regarding Rob Will and his rehab. The pair continue to reminisce on times lost, before the pair hold hands and eventually part ways. Now, a taxi actually pulls up to the ranch later that evening, and it appears to be Rob Will, who returns just as Oriana is about to sneak out. The Dutton Ranch takes drastic measures and lead all the cattle out, away from their home. While they drink by the waterhole, Zachariah and Azul dig a big hole. They're led down by the ranchers, who eventually open fire on the bull. "You don't deserve this," Rip concedes, as he pulls the trigger for the final time, killing all of them. Beth then reveals the final hammer blow, revealing that all the vet paperwork they had was forged. The cattle broker completely screwed them over. The Rip is pissed and confronts the guy, forcing him out of Rio Paloma that night. The pair burn his trailer too as they drive off. Now, although they do get a measure of revenge here, it doesn't really change the fact that their ranch is facing a very real and difficult problem now. With no cattle to speak of, Rip calls Everett and breaks the bad news to him. He then sits out looking at the stars, wondering just what their fate may be. Episode 5 of Dutton Ranch begins with Rip and Beth reflecting on the quiet outside the ranch. With no cattle, they found themselves at a bit of a difficult crossroads. Carter still hasn't spoken to Beth since their argument at the end of the last chapter, but Rip is confident he'll come around eventually. He also knows that they need to come up with a plan to get their ranch moving again, but for now the pair need to pay their bills. This bill paying comes from a new deal between the two ranches. Everett picks up Rip and they head over to the Jackson place, and at 10 Petal, Rip speaks to Beulah in private while Everett waits out in his truck. Rip wants to cut a deal and offers his services as the foreman there. Beulah admits she wants someone who can work smarter not harder, given their tight margins and the amount of land they have to cover. Beulah promises not just her money but also her loyalty if Rip proves his worth. For now it seems the pair are on the same page. Beth isn't exactly happy about this arrangement, given there's no love lost between her and Beulah, but Rip is adamant this is the best way forward. He leaves at 4:30 AM the next day, heading over to start work at Beulah's. Rip immediately organises the troops and puts the men to work, and his aura and calm but tough demeanour is enough to convince them all to follow his lead. However, it soon becomes clear that this isn't a tight-knit operation, because there's still plenty of hostility between Austin and Chet to contend with. Rip speaks to Austin after the day's work and they get talking about Wes. Given he went missing a few weeks ago, Rip realises this is connected to the dead body he found and dumped in the mine. Next, Rip speaks to Chet and forces him out. Beth doesn't trust Beulah, but is convinced that despite her burning through 3 foremans in the last year, the same isn't going to work with Rip. Meanwhile, Carter and Oriana end up over at Dwight's place. They drink together and even feed that leopard, but Miguel shows not long after to take Oriana away. It turns out Carter already knows about the cattle and the sickness, and he vents to Dwight about this. The guy offers some solid advice though about his family, although Carter doesn't really listen. Well, that is until cops show up at his place. Dwight tries to make a run for it, but he doesn't get far, and he winds up shot in the back, and while bleeding out, Carter is handcuffed right next to him. Back at the ranch, Chet confronts Whackin and threatens to oust Wes's murder too. Whackin pays him money and shrugs off the man's concerns, telling him he has 2 ways of leaving the ranch. This, of course, is a not so subtle hint that he could be taken care of, just like Wes. With Rip staying for dinner with Beulah, knowing if he doesn't then this could cause problems, Beth heads out after doing some research. However, she leaves dinner for Carter, who's currently indisposed at the police station. Sheriff Wade speaks to Carter, telling him that Dwight was a drunk, a thief and also an insurance fraudster. While Wade believes his death has made the county a better place, Carter is torn up over the death of his friend. In exchange for keeping quiet about Dwight being shot dead by the officers, he's allowed to go home and his folks won't find out about this either. Carter is a bit of a mess though, and Oriana catches up and gives him a big hug. That night Beth shows up to see Beulah at her place, swallowing her pride and deciding to have that promised drink after all. Speaking truthfully, Beth admits their herd has been destroyed thanks to the foot and mouth disease. She doesn't do well with fear and also wants to make money. Given the way Beulah's place has been laid out, complete with plenty of taxidermy heads hanging on the walls, Beth knows that Beulah will go to extreme lengths to protect what's hers. She's also done her research on the woman too, explaining what she's been doing all day. Now in 2007, Beulah and Rob Will were so desperate to make this ranch work that they turned the place into a game lodge for trophy hunters. This helped to pay the bills and get the ranch moving. In 2010, South Texas suffered the worst drought in a century and turned the place to dust. They survived, but since then the ranch has been holding on at best. Beth calls Beulah easy prey, but decides they need to evolve this ranch. Beth wants Beulah to hire her, and in doing so promises that in 3 years she'll rebuild this 10-petal brand into a household name, complete with premium cuts and completely recession proof. However, to make this happen, they're going to need a new breed. Beth is offering an exit and promises something substantial, and Beth promises that nobody will fight harder for her, and she wants 20% of the profit. In 5 years, Rip and Beth will then be out, and Dutton isn't part of the deal, and the name won't be hers, but she will get Beth's expertise. It's certainly an enticing offer, and when Joaquin finds out, he's shocked. However, things are about to take an awkward turn, given Rob Will is now back in town. That night, Beth returns to Rip and is confident that in a week, she'll know everything there is to know about Beulah. It's here where Rip brings up Wes's dead body and tells her they need to be careful around this family. Episode 6 of Dutton Ranch starts with Carter still distant from Beth. At breakfast, the family talk where Carter explains that he's heading out with Oriana and won't be back until late. He struggles to open up to the pair about his troubles and eventually leaves. Rip then turns his attention back to work. Tempet will have a new herd of Angus that needs branding, so he brings Zachariah and Azul over to help with this. They keep an eye on the herd and quickly take away any that need medical attention. Meanwhile, Everett shows to see Beulah, who's about to host a big party given the ranch is turning 190 years old. She wants Everett to be her date for this event, and he agrees. For now, business turns to Beth and Beulah, who fly out to meet a businessman named Zane. She knows how pivotal this meeting is to growing their business, because the guy was born and raised on the south side of Chicago, and he built his empire without inheriting a penny. According to Beth, Zane is someone who sees what most people don't. During the meeting, Beth talks a good game and explains the benefits of Tempetal, along with the package deal of an authentic cowboy story. Beth then turns the spotlight to Beulah, who talks about her family history and the tough times they've been through. Her charm, coupled with Beth's steely determination, seem to win him over. In the midst of this, Rob Will winds up Chet and tries to encourage him not to have such a coward's heart. After buying some guns, Rob Will calls Chet his real brother and decides they need to fight back and take what's rightfully theirs. While all this is going on, we cut across to the relative calm of Oriana and Carter fishing on the lake. Carter opens up and explains that, although he should feel grateful, he also feels lost. Carter feels like he's being funneled into a very specific version of who or what he is, and he's struggling with his own identity. Oriana encourages Carter to be his own man and not bend to the whims of those around him. While they talk, Carter admits that he loves her. Oriana does not take it particularly well, telling him he doesn't know what love is. However, she receives a message, cutting their fishing trip short. Back at Tempetal, hostilities continue to rise between Zach and Azul. During the branding business, the pair eventually agree to a little competition between the two ranches. Naturally, the Duttons come out on top. On the way to the house though, Chet arrives and holds a gun up to Joaquin. Chet loses control and shoots Joaquin in the hand, but before he can hit a kill shot, Miguel shoots Chet dead. While Miguel is left to clear up the mess, Rip arrives and takes Joaquin out on the road, demanding the truth about Wes's body. It's here Joaquin explains that Wes was Rob Will and Chet's dealer. Things spiraled out of control, and Wes paid the ultimate price for that. Joaquin promises that Rob Will isn't coming back, and all of this is dealt with, but we know that that's far from the truth. Either way, this is enough to convince Rip to bring Joaquin to Everett's place to get patched up. Now as the episode closes out, we cut across to Beth and Beulah one more time. Drinking at the bar, their chat takes an interesting turn when Beulah brings up the Yellowstone history and, in particular, what happened to Jamie. Now, Beth and Rip killed Jamie in Yellowstone series finale as revenge for Jamie's role in John Dutton's assassination. Beth knows Beulah is using this as leverage and keeps her cards close to her chest. Episode 7 of Dutton Ranch begins with us in the past. We're at August 1981 and we're right in the heart of Fort Worth. A young Beulah is dropped off by Mariano at the bar, but he keeps a close eye on her while she lets loose with her friends. There's line dancing, bull riding and plenty of drinking. And while Mariano hangs at the bar, Beulah is approached by a suave kid called Luke. She introduces herself as Angel, and the pair end up dancing quite quickly after a bit of flirting. The pair light up the dance floor and have good chemistry together, but there's something else going on here. The barmaid, Swellen, starts chatting up Mariano and hands over a bucket of beers. He's not in the mood to flirt though, given his wife and son Joaquin are back home. At this point, Swellen breaks character and admits she can't game a married man, and all of this was a play for Beulah to slip out. And Mariano does eventually find Beulah, some way up the road with her dress out of place and a nasty gash across her face. She's clearly been abused, but Beulah tells Mariano to lie and claims she fell off the bull. Back in the present, Beulah prepares for a big anniversary evening. She shows up to see the ranch hands, explaining that she's decided to set up an open tab at the Split Heart Bar so they can let loose. Beulah runs the party prep with an iron fist though, making sure everything is just so. For once, Oriana is actually playing ball and rocks up in a flowery dress. Beulah is delighted, but it's clear there's something else going on here. Before they head out to the party, Carter has a quiet word with Rip. He thanks him for everything he and Beth done for him and how they've treated him. Rip calls the kid his son in a lovely touch before they head out for a ride before the party. Back at Tempetal, Joaquin admits that he's grateful for what Beulah has done for him. She's prepped to hand over the reins of the ranch to him, with a big speech lined up that night about how much she cares. Now at the party, Oriana distances herself from Carter after his love confession and begins chatting up a guy called Harrison. Oriana introduces Carter as his friend and shrugs the kid off, telling him to get them drinks. It feels like a repeat of episode 1 with those girls at school, but this time Carter isn't falling for it. Stewing at the bar, Sheriff Wade approaches and warns Carter over getting involved. He winds the kid up, clearly itching for a reason to put him behind bars once again. Rip shrugs off Joaquin's thanks for patching his hand up, while Zane Nash arrives at Tempetal for the soiree too. Beth and Rip get involved, handing over some stirrups, which totally isn't a bribe to sweeten the deal, while Beulah even offers to take him on a tour of the whole ranch. While all this is going on, a big fight breaks out at the Split Heart Bar after a card game goes sideways. Although Tempetal comes out on top, Austin starts to doubt their entire operation. He brings up how Tempetal is corrupt and tries to rally everyone to his cause. The others know the deal here but keep quiet to avoid rustling feathers, while Azul and Zachariah exchange a knowing glance. Now back at the party, things obviously weren't going to be so simple, were they? Rob Will arrives and gate crashes the party, speaking to Beulah in her office. Oriana knew he was going to show up and kept it a secret, smirking as she walks away. As Beulah and Rob Will talk, we start to understand where all this hostility is coming from. And Rob Will has always hated his brother, and his problems have made him the focal point of the entire family. Beulah knows how dangerous he is, and Rob Will blackmails Beulah into submission, demanding that she announce him as the rightful heir to the ranch. He won't let Joaquin have it, and he's willing to kill the guy if she doesn't play ball. That night, Beulah gives her speech and announces that she's handing the ranch over to Rob Will. Nobody is happy, and quite a few people are absolutely shocked. Joaquin walks out and leaves the ranch, while Zane is completely incredulous. Zane confronts Beulah and brings up how she's the one who sold him on the idea of the ranch and the business. Without her, Zane doesn't like the prospects of the ranch being in the hands of a drug addict. As things look set to escalate here, Carter comes stumbling out the house with one of the prized bull heads. He smashes it on the floor, prompting Rip to reprimand his son and force him away. However, just as he does, Beulah grabs her neck and collapses on the floor. As the episode closes out, we cut back to the past one more time. That horrible incident at the rodeo wasn't just a one-off assault. As it turns out, Beulah got pregnant, and she shows up at her abuser's house to break the news. With Mariano sitting watch in the car, Beulah heads inside and shoots Luke in the head. Episode 8 of Dutton Ranch picks up with Beulah Jackson's life hanging in the balance. She's rushed off in an air ambulance and Rob Will joins her at the hospital. Joaquin shows up too alongside Oriana and Everett a little while later, biding their time and awaiting news about Beulah's fate. Off the back of this drama, Rip takes Carter home. He's clearly drunk and Rip is not in a particularly forgiving mood. He tells the kid to get it together and leads him home, ignoring the kid's vomiting and pleas for a break. In the morning, Beth speaks to Carter, who admits he's quit school. His dream is to be a cowboy, so Beth decides they should put that to the test. In fact, he's going straight to Tempetal to put in a hard day's graft. It's certainly a trial by fire for him, especially as Carter is still battling a nasty hangover. Rip works in pretty hard, forcing the kid to tend to a fence and get stuck in with manual labour. We soon learn that Beulah had a heart attack. She's going to be okay and will survive, but also wants to talk to her sons first. With Rob Will and Joaquin in the room, she tells them they need to work together. Furthermore, the reason she changed her mind is because Rob Will was weak and the ranch can be used as his protection. Beth shows up with some flowers to pay her respects, and she shoots daggers at Oriana too. She apologises for Carter's actions, but Beulah shrugs it off, basically chalking it up to boys being boys. Alone, Beth admits she's not exactly thrilled about working alongside Rob Will. She made a deal to work with Beulah, not her son, and she sees him as a liability, but Beulah is dead set on following through with this regardless. Everett also talks about this very same choice afterwards too. Beulah shrugs it off and claims she's beyond caring now, and given how close she came to dying, He agrees to take that final ride with her once she's up and moving again. Back on 10 Petal Ranch, a confrontation between Austin and Miguel threatens to spill over. Zachariah shows and manages to calm things down, but it's definitely touch and go for a while. The more pressing issue though stems from Carter leaving the fence unlocked, who's chewed out by the others over it and eventually decides to leave the ranch and the work outright. Rip isn't exactly pleased, and after a trying day, decides it's time to talk some sense into the kid. Rip does his best to talk to Carter about failure and what it's like to be an orphan. Unfortunately, Carter is so full of rage that he refuses to listen and eventually decides to bust out and leave the ranch completely. Meanwhile, Joaquin brings the gun used to kill Wes Ayres to Sheriff Wade. He's working on finding the body, but right now he wants the guy to issue a warrant. Joaquin will do anything to get Rob Will taken down, but Wade is nonchalant to the whole affair and tells him to play Clue somewhere else. When he wanders down to Dwight's farm, lost and drinking beer, Sheriff Wade approaches. Carter admits he wants a job with him, but Wade shrugs it off and tells him he should go home. Now at the bar, Austin confides in Zachariah and wants to trust him and Rip with a secret. He knows there's a darker secret with 10 Petal, and that night he speaks to Beth and Rip about it. It turns out 10 Petal have an operation down in Mexico that steal and smuggle cattle into the country illegally. All the paperwork is forged for Border Patrol and cattle brokers. It's the only way they've kept the lights on all this time, and the family has been crooked for a while. Wes wanted to get to the bottom of this, and he ended up dead after getting close to Rob Will. The Jacksons have put every ranch at risk in South Texas, which explains why 10 Petal has managed to keep going for so long. As the episode closes out, Joaquin makes the bold decision to phone his dad. Episode 9 of Dutton Ranch starts its finale with Rip fighting Rob Will when he badmouths Beth at the 10 Petal Ranch. The Duttons are here bright and early, off the back of Austin's intel last chapter. And it doesn't take long for the pair to find Rob Will's tally, where they also discover that some of the cattle are being used to smuggle drugs in. Without any concrete evidence, they bring Everett in to help. Now Everett finds the smuggled fentanyl inside the cattle, and it's clear from the 3 buckets worth that they find, this is a lot more serious than it first appeared. The street value of this works out to around $2 million, and Rip knows that because of this, someone is going to come looking for the gear. Rip urges Zachariah and us all to leave before things get too hot, but they're loyal and decide to stick by Rip no matter what. When Beulah finds out about the Duttons, she begins to spiral and tries to ring Joaquin, asking for help. He snubs her call though, deciding instead to wait for his father to show up. This obviously ties into the phone call he made at the end of the previous episode. Joaquin does meet his father, Mariano, and updates him on what's been happening across the season. Everett shows and confronts Beulah about the drugs at her place, and he's pissed until she eventually opens up about the past, including how Luke raped her and Mariano helped hide the body. And when Beulah's father found out about this though, he blamed Mariano, forcing him to take the heat and disappearing off to Mexico while they took care of Joaquin in the short term. Unfortunately, trouble at the border saw Mariano's wife, Joaquin's mother, killed. And as for the drugs, well, this goes back to the big drought where Beulah almost lost everything at 10 Petal. Mariano, though, had a proposition involving drug running through the border. Beulah naively thought Rip and Beth would just take over eventually, drug running and all. This explains why Beulah prodded Beth at the bar regarding her history with Jamie. It wasn't to weaponize it against her, it was to find a way for Beth to admit to being dirty just like she is. Now Beth tries in vain to find Carter while all this is happening, and Sheriff Wade isn't exactly forthcoming around this either. He doesn't reveal that Carter is over at Dwight's hanging out, but Oriana knows exactly where to find him. When she discovers that she's pregnant, she heads over to see him. Now it's Oriana who forces Carter to call Beth and let her know that he's okay. When Beth asks Carter to come home, he hangs up on her instead. And off the back of this, Oriana propositions the kid, suggesting they should just pack their stuff and leave together. Now it doesn't take long for Mariano to show up at Beulah's house with his gang. He demands Beulah let Rip and Beth go from their operation and to reinstate Joaquin publicly. With everything starting to kick off, Beth and Rip head home, where they find Beulah waiting for them. They load up the drugs in her car and confront Beulah about the drug running she's involved in. Beulah points out they came to her looking for work, and she apparently had no idea about Wes's body being buried on their ranch. For now, the Duttons let her go. However, it doesn't take long for things to kick off in a major way, when Mariano decides to send his men over to pay Rip and Beth a visit in person. He also tasks Joaquin with killing Rob Will too. Now, while Beth tries in vain to try and find Carter, Everett heads over to the Dutton Ranch where they await Mariano and his men. Now, a firefight does eventually break out, and Rip and the gang make short work of the goons. Mariano is not there with them though, as he's off securing his gear from Beulah. Over at Ten Petal Ranch, while Oriana is packing her stuff to leave, Rob Will opens up and tells his daughter that he's proud of her. When he shuffles on down to the hallway, Joaquin arrives and shoots his brother dead. When Beulah heads home and sees her son lying in a pool of his own blood, a distraught Oriana kneeling over him, she's shocked. Now, Rip and his boys handle the dead bodies over at the ranch next, dropping them in that abandoned mine. I mean, they're racking up quite a body count here. Beth and Everett hang back though, where the former is spiralling out of control. She can't find Carter and isn't quite sure what to do next. Well, he hasn't left the state with Oriana, that's for sure. That night, men show up at Dwight's place and knock Carter out, tying the kid up and taking off. The one remaining Mexican that didn't die in the firefight is then tortured for information by Rip and the others. However, before they can get any answers, Mariano rings Beth. He's got Carter. Now, as the episode closes out, Beth promises that if the Mexicans want them, they've got the full wrath of the Duttons coming right for them. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.